In the summer of 2008, construction workers renovating a castle in the Austrian Alps broke through the floorboards and found a sealed vault stuffed with 600 years of garbage. Twigs, straw, old shoes, and 4 linen bras. Not breastbands, not corsets. Bras. With individually cut cups, shoulder straps, and delicate lace trim. Here's the problem with that. Every fashion history book on the planet says the bra was invented around 1914. These were stitched in the 14th century. The archaeologist who examined them assumed it had to be a mistake, right up until the lab results came back. So, what did women wear before bras? Sit with that question for a second, because the answer is stranger than you think. Sometimes the answer is bras. And that's only the beginning of how weird the story gets. Because this question doesn't just go back a few centuries. It goes back past the corset, past the Middle Ages, past the fall of Rome, past the birth of Rome, all the way to the oldest images we have of women wearing anything at all. There are really 2 questions hiding inside this one. First, the surface version. What did women physically strap, wrap, or lace onto their bodies for thousands of years? And second, the far more interesting one. How did an entire piece of technology get invented, perfected, forgotten, and then invented again, with nobody noticing? Stay for that second one. And the last piece of this story, the reason we nearly lost all of it, might change how you look at your own dresser drawer tonight. But before any of that, you have to understand what the ancient wardrobe didn't have. Before you can have underwear as we know it, you need tailoring, cloth, cut, and sewn to follow the shape of a body. And for most of human history, that barely existed. Picture the ancient Mediterranean. No elastic, no hooks, no stretch fabric, no adjustable anything. Clothing was mostly rectangles, long pieces of woven linen or wool, draped, pinned, and belted. A Greek woman's entire outfit could be taken off and used as a bedsheet, and honestly, sometimes it was. In a world like that, support couldn't come from a clever engineered garment. It had to come from the simplest machine available, a long strip of cloth and a knot. And then, somewhere, someone tied that strip in a very particular place. The Greeks called it the Apodesmos, or the mastodeton, literally a breast binder. A band of linen or soft leather, wound around the chest, tied or tucked in place. Most people assume its job was lift, like a modern bra. It was closer to the opposite. Much of the time, the point was compression, holding everything firmly against the body so a woman could move, work, and breathe in a world with no other option. Why compression instead of lift? Because a band has no cups. The only thing a wrapped strip of fabric can do is hold things still. Greek vase painters even gave one to Atalanta, the mythical huntress who outran every man in Greece, which makes the breastband, technically, the first piece of athletic wear with a celebrity endorsement. But it's when this little strip of linen reaches Rome that we get to see it in action. Because the Romans left us a photograph. Well, the 4th century version of one. On the floor of the Villa Romana del Casale in Sicily, around the year 320, mosaic artists laid out a scene modern visitors call the Bikini Girls, 10 young women running, throwing a discus, lifting hand weights, dressed in briefs and a band across the chest that looks so much like a modern strapless top that people refuse to believe the date. That band had a name, the Strophium, and it was standard Roman underwear. But here's the reversal, and it says everything about Rome. Romans considered large breasts comical, something to snicker at. So girls were often bound tightly from a young age, in the belief it would keep their chests small. Think about that. The same strip of cloth and 2 opposite dreams. The Greeks gave it to a legendary athlete. The Romans used it to shrink their daughters. The Strophium was, in every practical sense, the sports bra of the ancient world, minus the choice. And for centuries, that was the technology. A band, a wrap, a knot. Then Rome fell, and something strange happens to this story. It goes silent. For roughly 1,000 years, we have almost no physical evidence of what medieval women wore underneath their clothes. Not because they wore nothing, but because of 2 brutal facts. First, linen rots. Stone temples last forever. Underwear lasts decades. So the absence of proof isn't proof of absence. And second, nobody wrote it down. Women's underclothes were literally unmentionable. Men's underpants show up in medieval art constantly, played for laughs, while women's were considered too indecent to depict. The record isn't empty because nothing existed. It's empty because everyone looked away, almost everyone. A French surgeon named Henri de Mondeville, writing around 1310, let one detail slip. Women with heavy breasts, he reported, would insert 2 bags in their dresses, adjusted to the breasts fitting tight, fastened each morning with a band. 2 bags, adjusted to the breasts. A century later, a German satirical poet mocked women who make 2 bags for the breasts, so all the guys would look at them. Historians read these lines for decades and mostly shrugged. Poetic exaggeration, surely. Nobody had ever found one. Then came that castle in Austria. Langberd Castle, East Tyrol. When workers hit that hidden vault in 2008, they pulled out around 2,700 scraps of textile, shirts, shoes, a coif, a completely preserved pair of underpants, and those 4 impossible garments. The archaeologist who got the case, Beatrix Nutz of the University of Innsbruck, said her first thought was what anyone's would be. There's no such thing as a bra in the 15th century. Her team spent months trying to prove the find was contamination, modern laundry that somehow slipped into old rubble. They failed. Every stitch, every seam, every technique was medieval. Finally, the samples went to a radiocarbon lab at ETH Zurich, and the dates came back, mid-1400s. One of the 4 even resembles a modern long-line bra with cut cups, a row of hand-sewn eyelets for lacing, and decorative needle lace, because apparently whoever owned it wanted it to be pretty 500 years before anyone was supposed to care. The bags in the old texts weren't a joke. They were real, and they'd been hiding under a floor the whole time. Read that again. The bra existed in the Middle Ages. Then it vanished. Which hands us the question that should be sitting in the back of your mind right now. If medieval women had this figured out by 1450, what on earth happened between then and 1914? The answer laces up the back. In the 1500s, fashion turned to structure, stiffened bodices, then stays, then the full corset, reinforced with reeds, wood, and whalebone. Support stopped coming from soft-fitted cloth and started coming from architecture. And to be fair to the corset, it worked. It shaped, it supported, and for everyday women, looser versions were more livable than the movies suggest. But let's be honest about the cost. You're a woman in 1880. You cannot fully dress yourself. Someone has to haul the laces tight behind you. Bending is a negotiation. Running is a memory. Your ribs have spent so many years against boning that the 2 bags, adjusted to the breast solution, soft, light, self-fastened, isn't just forgotten, it's unimaginable. Until a French woman took a pair of scissors to the problem. In 1889, Parisian corset maker Hermine Cadol cut the corset in 2 and began selling the top half bust support hanging from the shoulders instead of squeezing from below. Then, in the 1910s New York, a socialite named Mary Phelps Jacob, furious that her whalebone corset was poking through a sheer evening gown, had her maid bring 2 silk handkerchiefs and some ribbon, stitch them together, and in 1914 received the first U.S. patent for the backless brassiere. 2 soft pouches, fastened with a band. If that description sounds familiar, it should. It's Henri de Mondeville, word for word, 600 years late. And that's the last layer, the one I saved for the end, because it's the strangest part of all of this. We tend to assume technology only moves forward, that once something useful exists, humanity keeps it. The Langberd bras prove that's false. This wasn't a lost empire or a burned library. It was an everyday object, worn against the skin of ordinary women, and it still slipped out of human memory so completely that when it came back, we called it new and issued a patent, not because the design failed, because nobody thought women's comfort was worth writing down. The history was never lost, it was never recorded. So what did women wear instead of bras? For a few thousand years, a wrapped linen band, the Greek Apodesmos, the Roman Strophium. For the medieval centuries, fitted breast bags and laced supportive dresses, of which 4 survivors made it to us inside a castle floor. And for the last stretch before 1914, the corset, support by scaffolding. Run the tape. A band on a Sicilian mosaic around 320, cut linen cups in an Austrian castle around 1450, whalebone through the 1800s, two handkerchiefs and a ribbon in 1914. They wrapped, they stitched, they laced, and at least twice, centuries apart, they arrived at the exact same answer. Two soft cups and a band, without knowing anyone had been there before. The brow wasn't invented in 1914, it was remembered. So picture those construction workers one more time, standing in the dust of Langberg Castle, holding a scrap of lace-trimmed linen that was about to force the textbooks to be rewritten. Everyone was so sure they knew when the story started. The proof had started far earlier, spent 600 years, 2 feet under everyone, stuffed into a floor as insulation. Next time you toss a bra in a drawer without a second thought, remember, an entire chapter of women's lives was once treated exactly that carelessly, and the only reason we got it back is that somebody's trash survived. History forgot. The floor didn't.